So, a little over a year ago, I spoke with author David Pepper about his book, Laboratories of Autocracies, where we discussed, and he discusses in the book, the fact that the states across the country, and we've seen this in the news pretty much every day, have become these little horrible examples of how bad things can be in this country. So, we talked a lot about how bad things can be. Well, David Pepper is now out with a new book called Saving Democracy, A User's Manual for Every American, where he tells us now how we can fight back. So David Pepper, welcome back to Ring of Fire. And I love the way you've done this, right? Laboratories of Autocracy, we lay out all the problems. Now you're back out there and you're telling us, okay, now that we've identified what's happening, now we know where it's happening, who's doing it, what's going on, here's how we fight back. And that, of course, is the crucial piece of the puzzle here. So before we get into the content of the book, let's talk about what sparked this particular book as the follow-up to Laboratories of Autocracy.
It's so funny because when I wrote Laboratories of Autocracy, the last 60 pages or so were all about what we should do. But I heard, after our conversations and others and people read the book, I would hear the same thing every time. Oh my gosh, that is so disturbing what you described. What's happening in Tennessee and Ohio and Florida. It's so awful, they would tell me. I have to keep skipping to the end to see what I can do about it, or I can't make it through the book because it's so darn disturbing. So once I heard that enough, I thought, you know what? The reader's right. I need more on what to do about it. And I want to have a full book about all the things you can do very practically. The subtitle is literally a user's manual. What can you do about it? And so we need to understand the problem. And so read the first book if you haven't. And the second book goes through a little bit. But there really is a hunger. And one reason there's a hunger is because I think if you have a mindset, which is unfortunately the national narrative, is that it all starts and ends in Washington, and it's all about DOJ cases. And if you're the average person sitting at home and you're not in a swing state or in DC, you literally are left with the conclusion, I can't do anything about the decline of democracy. It's the most disempowering narrative ever. Well, once you realize that actually the battle for democracy is in every state, it's in red states, blue states, and the reason it's succeeding in those states is because no one thinks they can do anything about it. They think it's about DC. That's sobering, but my hope is empowering, because then you realize, oh my gosh, there's so much I can do about it because it's right where I live, whether it's running or going to that school board meeting or signing up to be an elections official or ending censorship. I go through, once you see that it's in your neighborhood and in your state, the truth is the options become almost limitless about what you can do about it versus sitting at home and watching it on MSNBC and thinking you can't do anything. The book goes through all of that for people.
You bring up a really good point there, especially with, school boards, because that has obviously in the last couple of years, that has become a hotbed of Republican takeover. I mean, we've seen it down here where I am in Florida. I know you've seen it in Ohio. We've seen it in Pennsylvania, because I think to a degree, the Republicans understand the need to start, I guess, a little bit more local than the Democratic Party has. And that's always been a massive setback, because Republicans know, we can start with these small little areas. We can change things over here in this city. Heck, I mean, even back when they were the Koch brothers, they would pour money into school board races. I can't remember if it was Ohio or Pennsylvania. They were putting money into local elections. And it turns out, well, they were doing that because it's cheaper to pay $5,000 to a city official to get your fracking permit than have to spend $100,000 on a federal official. And so they've been using it, obviously, to their advantage. And now it's time that we fight back and we use the same strategy. And you make a great analogy in one of the excerpts that I've read here about your son and his soccer game. So tell us this soccer analogy, because I think it's absolutely brilliant for this situation.
So he's actually in the other room. I'm glad he hasn't interrupted our discussion yet. He's off school. He's 9 years old. He plays soccer. Even within weeks of the first game, he figured out, well, if the ball comes to my side and he played defense, I better kick it to the other side quick, because he figured out that the team that's basically always on offense wins. And the analogy is in our country's politics, the offensive side of the field, where democracy is shaped, are those state houses and states. And one side is on offense in those places. Largely gerrymandered, often uncontested races that make up these state houses. They are taking shot after shot after shot. Tennessee, Texas, Ohio, Florida. Too often, not only are we, and we know that the team always on offense wins. We're too not often not only not on offense, we aren't even, as I say in my book, it's my son Jack's nightmare. We're often not on defense. We're literally not even contesting half the races in many of these states as they take shot after shot. Our response would be the equivalent of saying, okay, there are 10 people on offense. They're all taking shots. If only we could find the greatest goalie of all time, we will win. But we're not going to block the shots where they're taken. And so when Dobbs hit, for example, and it came out of Mississippi, most of the federal DC Democratic response was, we got to go elect more U.S. senators, which of course we want to. My response is, no, go to where the shot's been taken. These are toxic laws. Book banning is toxic. Who took the shot in Mississippi or in Ohio, in Texas banning abortion, and run against them next time? That should be our immediate instinct, that these extremists in these state houses face hard elections. Not just, maybe there's a gerrymandered district so they may win again, but someone for months is knocking on doors, explaining to every neighbor they've ever met that these people are extremists voting for unpopular things. If they don't face a contest, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. And too often we are leaving them to take all these shots. So that's the analogy. One other thing I'd say on the prior point about school boards. Even when we think about local offices on the Democratic or pro-democracy side, we frame it as if all these offices are the bench for the future for them to run for Congress or something. For the Koch brothers, for Steve Bannon, this isn't some bench. This is the front line. If that school board member never runs for everything else, but they ban a bunch of books, for them, that's mission accomplished. We have to realize that every state house run is a run for the front line of democracy. That's where you stand and be counted. Or a school board is now a frontline position. So we've got to start framing this all the right way, which is the front lines are state and local. And so everyone runs in a tough district or a winnable district. They're all heroes for going to the front line. And it's not only because someday they may run for something else. That's already sort of belittling the importance of all these positions.
Yeah, not everything has to be a stepping stone. Some of them can be a destination because we need the fighters in those positions. Now, you also brought up a really great point there about these people, Mississippi especially, the lawmaker who actually crafted the legislation that eventually became the Dobbs decision that undid Roe versus Wade. That individual ran unopposed in that race. There was not a single person that stood up in that race and said, you know what, it may be a deep red district. I'm assuming obviously it was, but nobody stood up and said, well, wait a minute, let me do this. Let me challenge it. Let me try to do something here. And the rest is history. I mean, it is America changing history with this decision to not even try to go after this individual. And you also point out you've had plenty of those in Ohio. We've had them in Texas. I mean, we've had them down here, obviously, in my deep red area of Florida, where people say, well, there's no chance in doing it. There's no reason to do it. And I think a great example of that is Lauren Boebert, who wins her reelection by 546 votes, I believe it was. But her district actually got more Republican since her first election, thanks to the redistricting. So she should have won by 7 or 8 percentage points, I believe, based on the district. But instead, it was 546 votes. You can do it. You can do it in a red district. It's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's doable. And I think that's the message. That's what we have to tell people.
One of the things I try and really get to in this book, it more strongly than the first book, is gerrymandering is terrible, and we have to stop it. It's a long haul to do it, but we have to do that. Not running is worse than gerrymandering. Not running in all these places fulfills their goal of gerrymandering because they don't want any conversation about what they're doing. And when you go from gerrymandering, not running at all, even though it's a tough race, you literally are giving them full lack of accountability. They cease to become public servants entirely all the incentives in a world where no one even runs against you are to be an extremist. And honestly, you no longer have an incentive to serve the public outcomes because you get back there no matter what. So, Brett Favre is more important to you in Mississippi, or private entities like Big Energy in Ohio, which led to this scandal. Once you don't even have an election, and I go through in the book, it's a crisis of uncontested races. You mentioned the examples I go through. The authors of the abortion bans, no exceptions, in Ohio, and the one that led to that 10-year-old rape victim having to go to Indiana, the Texas one that led to that crazy bill where people could sue doctors, and the one in Mississippi that led to Dobbs. None of those three authors had an election challenge the next election. Guess what? But first of all, those bills are toxic in their own states. The polling is very clear. Very few people agree with abortion bans, no exceptions. So not running against them is giving them a free pass for something that's actually very unpopular. And number two, once they're in this world of not only gerrymandering, but no accountability at all, they have only an incentive to be an extremist. 50% of the Tennessee Republicans, for example, that group that voted out those 2 state reps and almost took out the whole Tennessee 3, 50% of those people did not have an opponent in the prior election. Wow. Every incentive that they face, they are better off voting out the 2 Justins to avoid the next primary than voting to be reasonable and keep them in as their colleagues. When you start running against people, even if you don't win, and I agree with you, you're going to win in some places because they've, like Lauren Boebert, become so toxic and sometimes corrupt. But even if you don't win, you are the first person bringing some measure of accountability to extremists who've never otherwise had it. And that over time, everything's about a long game. I go through in the book. Over time, running every time, if you do it, you start pushing the arc back towards the middle. The accountability comes from the middle. And if you don't do it every time, which unfortunately right now we do not do in many places, it bends towards the extreme, which is why states like Iowa and Indiana that voted for Obama, and Missouri that voted for Clinton, are becoming extremist hells after being blue not that long ago. We allow that to happen. We fuel it when we basically walk away and say we're not even going to run against these people. So we have a choice here. We can build an infrastructure that values running everywhere, or we can continue to not have one. And when you don't have one, guess what? No one runs because they don't even feel that it's a valued thing to do. So it's tough to step up and run these places. We've got to surround these people in tough districts with support, with a framing that says you are a patriot for doing it. And in the end, also have some dollars available, not all of it, not even most of it, but take 20% of what Amy McGrath raised against Mitch McConnell, put it into 8 states, you'll fully fund a whole lot of races. So we've got to be smarter about what a battle plan for democracy looks like. And that means carving some of them. It's not zero sum, by the way, but even if it were, taking some of the money that we throw at federal races and start being smart about to see that it can really boost someone in district after district after district in places where right now we're not even competing.
It's worth mentioning, too, while we're on the subject, Marjorie Taylor Greene in her first election did not have a Democratic challenger. I don't know if that would have changed things, but I think the point is, and you explain this, it's about getting the message out there, because if you do not have that Democrat running in that race, all the people in that district, are going to hear are Republican talking points. The only ads they see on TV are how great the Republican Party is. There's no counter messaging of any kind. There's nobody knocking on their door to even question, why are you supporting this other person? Can you tell me what this other person has done that's made your life better? Those simple questions to get people thinking is what we have to have in this country, because if we don't have it, like you said, that pendulum swings all the way to the right and it opens the door for more extremists to come in. And if you get people thinking, it may not change their mind in this election, but maybe the next one, and then maybe 10 other people. So it's a long game, right? We're not going to change it overnight, but we're not going to change it at all if we don't get in this. And you can do it when you start talking to people. Put your own ideology even aside when you're talking to them. Just say, listen, Yeah, I'm over here, but that's not important. What's important is what's happening in your life. When was the last time the politician showed up at your door? When was the last time you looked at your paycheck and said, oh, wow, they did something better for me? Those questions, those just thought points are so powerful, and we're not using them the way we should.
Yeah. I mean, no campaign means not only do they only see their incumbent in a parade waving to them, and only do they only hear the positive. They don't generally even know what the State House is doing. And when these places are being used as the place to attack democracy, it's really dangerous that millions of Texans and millions of Ohioans don't even get the most basic information about what that State House is doing. The other thing I'd say is, and I go through this in the book, part and parcel with the gerrymandered, unaccountable legislature will be indefensibly bad outcomes for people. Their MO becomes fork over, because the public all of a sudden isn't part of their equation. They're going to win no matter what. That's how they think about it. So who do you make happy? The for-profit school operator that turns out to be a scam. The big energy company who wants to bilk energy ratepayers. You know, on and on and on. The MO of these state houses, almost to a state, is take public goods and give them to private players. The public can't stop you because you're gerrymandered. The private players reward you handsomely with a piece of the pie you've given them back as contributions. If you believe that, and I think it's very clearly the case in many of these states, they're doing the same thing everywhere. The public outcomes will inevitably be declining in these places. The same reason that Russia's army is empty. Like, corruption and no public accountability hollows out public goods. So here's what you run on if you're in one of these tough districts. Have you looked at the shape of our rural public schools since they started giving the vouchers to everybody? Many of them are falling apart. You're paying more for Johnny to play football because that school's budget has been screwed by the fact that your legislator has given a big bunch of money to a bunch of for-profit school operators that aren't in your district. Or, you know, on and on. Or the local Main Street is a wreck because they didn't invest in infrastructure. Or as Gretchen Whitmer said, have you looked at the roads lately? Let's fix the damn roads. There are a lot of really potent issues that, as you said, aren't about what's being argued about in D.C., but your local community, I guarantee you, is suffering because of that gerrymandered state house. In Mississippi, it's, you know, allegedly, I'll say for legal reasons, Brett Favre taking money from TANF that was supposed to help people in need and using it to build volleyball courts. Like, that type of thing is happening all over. And a good candidate, I guarantee you, where you are, just like Gretchen Whitmer or the current Democratic governor of Kansas, who ran on education being undermined by Sam Brownback's trickle-down nonsense, there are issues that you can run on that the people of your district will actually agree with. And they're largely not partisan. And can you imagine, I'm a guy whose kid's been out of school for 3 days trying to figure out what to do every day. If you're down to 4 days of school a week, which some places are, that's an amazingly potent issue, not only because of education, because of families trying to figure out what to do with their kid on Fridays. I guarantee you, if you're down to 4 days of school a week, it's not because of the school board, it's because of that state house taking all the money, giving away. So there are many, many issues you can run on in these types of districts.
And I think it makes a lot of sense, too, because right now the media says everybody in this country has got to be concerned about the debt ceiling and how it works and all that. Look, the average person, obviously, if we, were to default, horrible economic consequences across the globe, don't get me wrong, but the average person doesn't know what the debt ceiling means. They don't know what it is, why it exists, or any of that. What they do care about, like you said, is the fact that, hey, my suspension is now torn up because I'm driving over these potholes every day. Now I've got to go spend $1,000 down at Pep Boys to get this fixed. This city is falling apart, and y'all want me to be concerned about the fact that these lawmakers are bickering over who's going to cut what from which budget. Exactly. I'm worried about my backyard. Sometimes literally, like with the East Palestine train derailment was in people's backyards.
Great example.
And this is actual infrastructure that your state house could be fixing, could be repairing, could be protecting, but the media is telling you, no, focus on this fighting in D.C. Look at these weird and wacky characters. No, look at your backyard, because that's where your life is. And these people are making decisions every day that alter in some cases, whether or not you can even survive where you live.
Absolutely. No, my guess is almost everywhere you will be able to point to those basically indefensible public outcomes. The reason they gerrymander in the first place is if they thought they were doing great and could get reelected, they wouldn't need to gerrymander so much. They know they're too extreme for their districts. Sending a rape victim to Indiana is something that almost no Ohioan would agree with. So you need a gerrymander to protect yourself from the consequence of your extremism. And they also are delivering public outcomes that generally are indefensible. The school, here's one example in Ohio that drives me nuts. For 13 years, the State House has raided local government funds to give out tax cuts at the top. What do most of those local government funds pay for? Police and fire, probably the biggest element. This entire time, who's been defunding the police in Ohio? They have been. It's standard Republican policy, but we get so caught up, we never even pointed out that actually they're the ones oftentimes projecting what they themselves are doing. And so you could run an entire campaign around if you're frustrated about your small town not feeling safe or not having a good fire response, it's not the mayor's fault. It's that state rep who has voted to defund your town for 13 years to give tax cuts that no one in your town has ever seen. So there's issue after issue like that. If we could bring the lens back down there. And right now, why do people not blame their state house? Because for the most part, if we're not running, they don't even know what the state house does. So they don't even know that they should be blaming the state house for their roads falling apart or their schools falling apart, or the fact that their police staffing is half what it was 10 years ago, or let's say a quarter what it was 10 years ago. We can make that case if we're running.
And, it all comes back again to that soccer analogy, because when you're talking about that issue, taking the money from the police and firefighters, giving it in a tax cut to the wealthy, it's because on that right side as well, those Republicans have been telling us the Democrats are defunding the police. They're defunding the police. So Democrats are sitting there trying to play defense instead of being able to go on the attack. So we got to overhaul the messaging system, because the messaging system for the entire left is bad. I mean, it's not good. We've got some great, super smart, wonderful people out there. We've just got to get it together, get some kind of unity, because we're bad about that on the left as well. But if we can do that, we can get the message out there, we can unite, we can move from defense to offense and get these changes happening, I think.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons the messaging isn't talking about how we are is because the message ends up being a function of, are you running everywhere or not? And once you realize you're knocking on doors in areas you weren't before, your message, all of a sudden, you're showing how their policies are not just crushing urban schools, which they are, but rural schools. But that ends up not being part of your message if you're not there. And so I actually think the idea of, and what's amazing to me, and I see this in Ohio and you see this in Florida, we also don't have to dissect the electorate in little pieces. And oftentimes I always hear, well, should we run to motivate our base, or should we go talk to people in rural, as if it's zero sum? It's not the same message. The damage being done on many issues, not all. There's obviously certain things that are racially clearly disproportionate, and we should never lose sight of that. But much of the damage being done by their broader attacks on public goods are being felt in very similar ways in all parts of states. And so if again, when Gretchen Whitmer talked about roads and infrastructure, and when Laura Kelly talked about the destruction of public schools, that was a very broad message that people in cities and rural could all sit around their table and think, oh yeah, she's describing our life. So, but often when we don't run in these places, we don't really see that there are messages that we can hammer home with in all those places.
Absolutely. So David Pepper, the new book is Saving Democracy, a User's Manual for Every American. Where can we find it? Is it available yet? And where can we find you on social media?
It is available. You can get it generally where you get books online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I have a website called savedemocracy.us where it gives those options. If it's not in your local library, ask for it. A lot of bookstores will carry it if you order it. You can also find me at David Pepper on Twitter. I'm often talking about all this stuff. You mentioned I do these whiteboards where I try and explain things in 2 minutes that seem to be pretty popular. So whatever you do, you're on the front line of democracy wherever you live. Don't watch TV and watch. Of course, I want Jack Smith to bust Donald Trump for his crimes, but and that could help with democracy. But let's be clear. If Donald Trump were locked up tomorrow, the Florida legislature, the Ohio legislature would keep right on attacking democracy. So rather than waiting for these magical solutions that fix it all, know that actually you, where you are, you're on the front line. And it's when we all start acting like we are and taking the practical steps, some of which I put in my book and hope are helpful. When we start all shoring up democracy in all these states is when we really start making progress. And by the way, one little final point. They have been living with their extremism hidden for a long time. And their goal is to keep it hidden. There's a reason Mitch McConnell told Lindsey Graham not to talk about a national abortion ban. They know that their stuff they're talking about is too toxic. There's a reason why the election denying secretaries of state lost in every swing state last year. They're too toxic, but they're good at hiding that. Well, they're not hiding it anymore. Marjorie Taylor Greene is the face of their party, and as are Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. And so with that fully exposed, if we're smart this coming 2 years, and with the presidential election and their extremism exposed, if we this time don't just think about federal office, but recruit to run everywhere and run hard everywhere at all levels with their extremism on Front Street, I think we can have a huge banner couple years for democracy as we start building this long game. So the opportunity is right now to take advantage of a couple factors that are in our favor and to run with it. And my hope is this book I've written helps people figure out how to very specifically do that where they live. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, David. It's been wonderful. Welcome back anytime.
Okay. Take care. See you soon.
This is Hattie. Hattie wants to know why you have not subscribed to our channel. You obviously like our videos, so do us a favor and subscribe.